Lawyer of the Year Award from the Texas Criminal Defense Lawyers Association, and my dad. Congratulations on this honor, Dad, and why don't you start from the beginning and tell us where you grew up.
Okay, I'm originally from Ohio. I grew up in a small town until about 12, and then we moved to a farm, so I call myself an Ohio country boy. It's literally true that I milk cows by hand in the morning before going to school, and I never ever dreamed that I'd ever be here in this place. My father was a native of the area that I grew up in. Was in World War II. Actually never finished his his last year of high school. My mother was a graduate of Ohio State, was a teacher. I also went to Ohio State, as did three of my siblings. I have four siblings. I'm the oldest of five. My first youngest brother, my first youngest is a sister who just retired last year from teaching in Eastern Ohio. Next in line is a brother who actually has been living on a 40-foot ocean-going sailboat for the last 7 years and just completed the Atlantic crossing, is currently in the Azores on his way to the Med. The next youngest is a sister who taught her entire professional career near Albany, New York. Was actually selected as New York Teacher of the Year sometime before she retired. It was during President Clinton's tenure because she actually met him in the White House. My final youngest brother is a retired Master Sergeant from the Air Force. At the time that he retired, he was married to another Master Sergeant from the Air Force. She unfortunately passed away, and he lives in Tennessee. By the way, my sister from New York finally wised up and moved to Florida to get out of the snow. So that's where we grew up.
Why don't you tell us about your family now?
My family now, I have an extraordinarily beautiful and talented daughter who's doing the interview. She lives in Austin. She's a graduate of the University of Missouri Journalism School and a master's degree in journalism from the University of Texas. But the oldest is a son who lives in Houston, currently working for Waste Management. He has a bachelor's in management from Texas A&M. My wife, we originally met in 1966. We were married in 1967. We've been married a long time. Unfortunately, there was a period of 11 years when we were divorced. We got remarried again, so we're back together again. She's a native of Divine, Texas, which is about 30 miles south of San Antonio, which is one of the reasons we decided to retire to San Antonio. It wasn't our only option. We'll talk about where I was at the time, I'm sure, but we decided to come back here and retire for my first career.
What did you study at the Ohio State University?
At Ohio State, I graduated with a bachelor's degree in mathematics. My first 2 years were in engineering, primarily because that's what my dad wanted me to do. He and I had a falling out. Then I decided I wanted to be a dairy farmer. I spent 2 years in dairy science. And then I realized that I just didn't have the money to do that. So I put 3 years of math into, got a bachelor's degree in mathematics. While I was in the Air Force, my first career, the Air Force sent me to Texas A&M. And I got a master's degree in computer science.
So before you went to law school, you spent 27 years in the Air Force.
I did. I spent 27 years in the Air Force. I came in as an officer from ROTC out of Ohio State, so I never went through the basic training here at Blackland in San Antonio. We had a very wide and varied career. I say we because my wife and your kids shared that. I had, I think, 13 assignments in 27 years. My wife and I spent up, Carolyn and I set up house 21 times in those 27 years. I retired as a full colonel. I was in the computer and communications business. I did everything from writing, large mainframe operating system software. I was a unit commander a couple of times. I was in the system engineering shop of a major system acquisition, state-of-the-art computer communication system. And then later, I was in a different program. I was a program director, that is, leading the entire acquisition of it for another state-of-the-art computer communication system. Unfortunately, we were trying to build secure computers, and you can't do that. So both of those programs ultimately failed. My last assignment was with the office, a special office that was set up in Colorado Springs. It was the Joint Chiefs of Staff office that did technical verification of the warning systems worldwide that told our national decision makers whether or not our country was under attack from whatever source. So I retired out of Colorado Springs, and in fact, while I was on final retirement leave, I actually matriculated and started law school at St. Mary's here in San Antonio.
So what was your favorite assignment?
Colorado Springs was probably my second. I think my favorite assignment was Greece. We spent 2.5 years in Athens, Greece. I was the deputy commander of the unit there, communications unit. We were there, fortunately, for 3 Thanksgivings. And each of those 3 Thanksgivings, we had subordinate units whose commanders invited me, my wife, and my children to spend Thanksgiving with them on a mountaintop, on a remote mountaintop on an enclosed communications facility. That was quite an experience. We really enjoyed that. Our overseas assignments also include one at Alconbury, England. I spent a tour in Saudi Arabia back when Iran and Iraq were fighting each other. And of course, I had a tour in Vietnam.
When did you first become interested in the law?
I first became interested in the law when I was about knee-high to a grasshopper. I had an uncle in Columbus who was a lawyer. I've learned subsequent to that he was a transactional lawyer. I didn't know that he didn't go to court. And of course, there were things, television was just starting to come into view then. And we started seeing some television dramas about courtrooms, and it made me interested in the law. But my first love was actually math and science. It was always in the back of my mind about the law. When it came time for us to retire from the Air Force, I had 3 years left before mandatory retirement. And they were talking about sending me back to the Pentagon. My wife and I had spent 2 tours in the Washington, D.C. area. We didn't really want to go back there and retire from that point. So we talked about it, and we both realized that if we just retired after the stress of the jobs that I'd had, I'd probably die quickly if I just sat on the rocking chair. So I talked to my wife, and I said, one of the things I always wanted to do was be a lawyer. And she said, well, why don't you? So I did. I took this test called the LSAT. I didn't know anything about the LSAT. I didn't know you could prepare for it. Didn't know you could study for it. But I got accepted to a couple of schools, one of which was St. Mary's. And it's just been uphill since then.
Why did you decide on St. Mary's?
Well, again, we had decided we were going to settle in South Texas. She's from Divine. We actually had considered 2 other places. I don't know that you know this. We had considered the London, England area and the Athens, Greece area. We both enjoyed both of those locations really a lot. We had a good friend who was a returned Vietnam POW, 6 years in captivity, who actually retired to Greece. They enjoyed it. Well, we decided to come to San Antonio. So since I got accepted in St. Mary's, San Antonio, that's where we came.
So you were 51 when you started law school.
Well, I was 51. Actually, I've never been able to get my 39th birthday right, so I keep working on that part. There's a rumor that I was 51 when I started law school. That's true. About, nearly 30 years since I'd last studied anything. It was an interesting first semester.
Yeah, what was it like being a non-traditional student? How did the other students react to you or classes?
As it turns out, I wasn't the oldest person. There were 1 or 2 others that were a couple years older than I. Obviously, I didn't fit into their party plans, but we all participated as part of the class. They accepted me, and of course, I accepted them. I don't know about the professors, but we did all right.
Why did you choose to go into criminal defense?
Good question. Part of which I can answer. Some of it has been driven by a couple of assignments I had and some things that I learned about what the government can do that made me say we need somebody on the other side. The other thing is, it sounds a little flaky, but I considered defending an individual in court who's been accused of something and has constitutional rights. That's a continuation of my oath to defend the Constitution as an officer in the Air Force. I briefly considered, because of my background and all the experience I've had, of doing patent law. But I gave that up, I think after the first semester when I took some criminal stuff. I just decided that was where I wanted to be. I enjoy trial work. I enjoy writing appeals, and I figured out what everything was about, and I said, that's what I'm going to do, and that's what I've done.
You're a sole practitioner. Why did you decide to go that route?
I am a sole practitioner. For years, I was truly by myself. I now am proud to say I do employ one secretary. I had spent 27 years in a very large bureaucracy, and I had decided I was not going to do another bureaucratic job. I never applied to be a prosecutor or work for anybody else. I never applied to any firms. I was going to do my own thing after so long of being part of a very large organization. And I have to say that my technology background and my expertise with computers and communications kind of made that a little bit easier. I'm probably one of the most automated sole practitioners that you're going to find. I knew from get-go how to do that stuff, how to manage the stuff, how to work the networks. It made it a lot easier for me to do sole practice.
Even though you're a sole practitioner, you work with other people like Warren Wolf, and you two are both being recognized for this award.
That's true. Warren and I are co-recipients of this award. I owe a lot to Warren. Warren has been working this case. It's Trevino v. Thaler. It was a favorable decision out of the United States Supreme Court in May. And he has been working the case since 2002. In 2006, I joined him, replacing another second chair that he had. So since 2006, he and I have been working together. And yet we have formed a really what I consider a really significant team. Our capabilities, our talents merge nicely. Obviously, we have a wide variance of background and life experiences. He's a kid from the Bronx projects, an Eagle Scout, Ohio country boy, as I said. We approach things differently. We are able to talk about those things in private meetings, which I'll never reveal. Sometimes they get exciting, but we come out of there with a way to approach a problem. And over those years, we've really figured out how to work well together.
Why don't you tell us more about the Supreme Court case? Like, when did you find out it was accepted? And what kind of preparation did you do for it?
Oh, boy. October the 29th of 2012 was when the petition for certiorari order was granted. And I got to give Warren some credit here. I was the primary writer, he was the primary strategist and speaker in our team. And I was tasked with writing the petition for cert. And it was just a few days, I don't know, 3 or 4 days before the cert petition was due. He was checking on me to see if it was done. And the way I write, unfortunately, I've learned this over the years, is I think and think and think before I put anything down on paper. And I didn't have anything on paper yet. I had it almost fully drafted in my head, but I didn't have it on paper yet. Warren and I had worked together through the Fifth Circuit and through the Federal District Court. And he wasn't nervous. He wasn't concerned. He didn't tell me to get on it or chew me out for not having it done. He understood. We filed the petition. It got granted. As I recall, on the day that it was granted, ours was one of 4 that was granted, and something like 263 that day that were denied. After it was granted, we just went into full mode in preparing for the argument. We had a firm from Washington, D.C. who volunteered pro bono to write and prepare the briefs, publish them with our review, obviously. Since Warren was officially the lead on the case, Warren decided that he was going to do the oral argument. This team in D.C. was headed by Mr. Seth Waxman. Seth Waxman had been the Solicitor General of the United States under President Clinton. He'd argued before the court in excess of 60 times. He probably personally knew more than one of the justices on that court. And like I say, I had headed the writing part of our team, but when Seth came on board, he made it clear that he was heading the writing effort. So my effort changed from actually writing to reviewing and to helping Warren prepare for the moot courts, or for the oral argument. We actually went through 11 moot courts. I attended all but one of them. He got an invite to do a moot court in Chicago, and I couldn't afford to go there. By the way, we've still not been paid for the work that we did in the Fifth Circuit. So I couldn't afford to do that. We both shut our practices down, essentially. And we would meet almost every day talking about strategy. We researched the justices. Warren read books. I didn't read them, but Warren read books written by the justices on how to present to them. We listened to previous oral arguments. Warren listened to well over 100 hours worth of recorded prior arguments before the Supreme Court, all the way back to Gideon v. Wainwright. He worked his tail off, and I did the best I could to help him to be an alter ego, if you will, and to work with him on getting that stuff done. We worked right up until the last moot we did was Saturday before the oral argument on Monday. It was in D.C., and we did 2 moots on that Saturday. So it was quite an effort, and I'm sure, I know I was working on adrenaline high for 4 months, and I'm sure he was too.
What was the actual day like? How did it feel to be sitting there in front of the justices?
The actual day is interesting. And I should note that, of course, you were there, and your husband and my son were there. Unfortunately, my wife was too ill to travel. But I will say, I never saw you. I have no idea who was in the audience. As you know, family, the people who are going to be at council table and their guests, and Warren had his wife, daughter, and son-in-law there. We meet in a special room, all of us together, who were going to argue that day. And that experience was unique. It was relaxing. It was much more collegial than you'll see in other courts where people, before they argue, are trying to cajole or intimidate one another. It was an interesting experience. Then we were separated from y'all, and we were led in. We were the second argument of the day. We had 2 people from the firm in D.C., including Mr. Waxman, sitting with us. So there were 4 at council table, Warren, me, and 2 others. We sat in a set of tables immediately behind the people who were arguing the first time. So we got to listen to their argument. I have to admit, I don't remember much of it. And when they were through, we simply moved up to the next set of tables. Chief Justice called the case. Warren stepped up to the lectern and began to argue. Interestingly, I opened my notebook, and I took out my pen, as I had done in all of the moots before, and I was preparing to make notes and perhaps pass something to him or discuss something with him. When he took the break, he argued first, and then the state would argue. And it was after just a few seconds that I put the pen down. I'm sorry. A little emotional here.
That's great.
Warren was in the zone. He absolutely nailed that argument. I just sat back and watched. It was tremendous. We had done such a job preparing that he didn't get anything he wasn't prepared for. There was one that was maybe a little off, but he handled it. When he sat down, he and I looked at each other. I was on the table, not at the table, and he, of course, was over like one away from him. And our eyes met, and we winked at each other because we knew he had it. It was emotional. It was also interesting. The lectern in the Supreme Court is very close to the justices, much closer than any other court I've ever been in. And we hear a lot about Justice Thomas and how he doesn't ask questions. Well, I was sitting on the end where we were on the side where Justice Thomas sat. And Justice Thomas started out sitting, and by the time it was over, he had leaned so far back in his chair, I could no longer even see him. The others were engaged, but he was listening, I'm sure. It was quite an experience. It was quite an experience.
So how did you feel when you found out you won?
When we found out we won, we felt so good about it. We were so nervous that, we thought we had nailed it so well. We thought the argument was so well. We thought our briefs and the issues we presented were done so well. It was kind of like we ought to win. And it would be a great disappointment if we don't. More than just, it's a little. We got a 5-4 decision. It was exhilarating. It really was. It was not nearly, I have to, perhaps because I wrote most of the cert, but it wasn't as significant to me as the cert being granted. Warren, I'm sure, was climbing the wall. I wasn't with him when I found out. It was really significant. And then, of course, we immediately, that day, started figuring out what the next step is, where we're going, how we're going to litigate the issues.
What was the most important thing you learned from that case or that experience?
Good question. I learned a couple of things. I learned how important it is not to rush to put things down on paper. For me, that's the way I have to write. The other thing I learned was that one should not take a case and decide a priori what issue is going to be argued for the Supreme Court. We actually raised 2 issues to the Supreme Court in our cert petition. We thought the second issue was much better. We included the first one because there was a possibility that it would be looked at. It was based on another case that the court decided last year, and we were saying that case should apply to Texas. It was decided on an Arizona circumstances. And we thought the second issue was much better, the Brady issue. Turned out the court didn't agree with us. We thought that the other issue that we were raising that was granted would probably be granted because there were a couple of other people who had raised the same issue, and we thought they were headed by people who'd done this for years. Warren and I had never been there before. We were newcomers, and our petition got granted. So the lesson is work every issue as though it may be the issue that's granted, because that's what we did. We were surprised at the issue that got granted, but we were not unprepared for it.
Do you have any other advice for people working in tough cases?
Advice in what?
For anybody else working in a tough case, maybe not necessarily.
Looking at a tough case. A couple. Obviously, work the issue, work it hard, don't give up on it. Our case is a death penalty case. We had to, at least I had to look at it from a legal standpoint and take the fact that we had somebody's life here. That's always significant and important. But get the emotion out of that and make a strong legal argument and not an emotional argument. That's not going to win the day. It may make us feel better, but it's not going to do the day. So look at the facts. Find out the factual and the legal argument that you need, and do that as best you can.
So how long have you been a member of TCDLA, and what has that membership meant to you?
I have been a member of TCDLA since I was a law student, and I don't remember if it was my second or third year that I joined. My third year, I was a member of the first full year criminal justice clinic operation. And I know that I was a member by that time. It was headed by Mark Stevens, and if I hadn't been a member, he probably would have kicked me. I owe a lot to Mark, professionally, as a lawyer. So it's been a long time. Let me say this about TCDLA. It is a fantastic organization. The Rusty Duncan is, I tell everybody, is the premier event for criminal defense lawyers in the state. I had an experience to draw on members of TCDLA several years ago. I was trying a very difficult and gruesome manslaughter case. The facts were ugly. The pictures were ugly. The client insisted on trying the case, and it's his decision, so we did the best we could. It was after about 3 days of trial, the state put it on their case, and we couldn't find any witnesses, unfortunately, would help us. But after 3 days, my client leaned next to me at counsel table after the judge had just recessed for the day and said, "Come visit me in jail tonight. I know what I'm going to say now." That scared the bedevil out of me. I went and visited him immediately. He said, "I know what I'm going to say. You call me to the stand, I've got an answer, I'm going to get off." Turned out he was going to lie through his teeth. Problem is, he has a constitutional right to testify, and I can't keep him off the stand. But I also can't suborn perjury, present that. I spent that whole night calling TCDLA members across the state. Got 2, 3 in the morning I was calling folks, asking what do I do in a situation like this. I got great answers. We went in the next day, figured out what we had to do, and we did it, and he got to make his say. We didn't breach any laws, we didn't breach any ethics, but the resource that's available is just unbelievable.
What other professional organizations do you belong to?
Well, I'm a fellow of the College of the State Bar of Texas. I belong to the National Criminal Defense Lawyers Association, National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. Get that one backwards, I apologize. And I'm on a past president of the San Antonio Criminal Defense Lawyers Association as well.
Which I hear is also honoring you in Florida.
That's true. They just announced last week that they are also recognizing Warren and me as co-recipients of the Kim Young Lawyer of the Year Award for 2013.
And you're on the homepage in the video.
That's true. In addition to being a past president, I'm also the webmaster and the listserv administrator. When you go to SACLA.com, we activated that web page when I was president. It was supposed to be a video of the president reading people to SACLA. Nobody else has chosen to put their ugly mug out there, so that video on the homepage of SACLA.com is me. We've changed the title underneath to say webmaster, no longer says president, but my video is still there.
If you had to name 1 or 2 people who have had the most influence on your life and your career, who would they be?
Well, I've named one, and that's Mark Stevens. Professionally as a lawyer, he has undoubtedly had the most significant impact on me. I was in his clinic. He taught me. He and I can, and forgive me, Mark, he and I can both be a little bit bullheaded at times, but we get around that. But he continues to mentor me, answer questions. He's always available. I have learned professionally more from him than I think from anyone else. And she's going to kill me for this, but the other person is my wife. Our marriage didn't survive law school. I'm sure that was my fault. We're remarried. She is an inspiration. She inspired me to go to law school. She gives me an inspiration daily, a smile daily, and She's in her second remission from terminal cancer and still smiles.
So you appeared before the Supreme Court and you won your case. Where do you go from here?
Where do we go from here? Well, one of the things that I've thought about as I try to process receiving this award, first of all, I really thank Warren for making us such a team together that the TCDLA felt that we should both be honored. But many years ago, in a going away ceremony, as I left a unit, one of the units I commanded in England, my people gave me a plaque that said, "Success is not a destination, it's a journey." And I realized that from here, we are under a considerable amount of pressure to continue to perform as though we belong here. I'm sure Warren and I both look at it that way. We have an obligation to do more, to constantly learn, and to get better, to not shy away from the tough cases. When Warren was appointed to the habeas case, and to this case, he knew very little, admittedly, about habeas work. He and I both went out and got training, took everything we could. We have to continue to do that. And so I don't have any goal. I didn't have a goal of getting to the Supreme Court. I'm also board certified. I tell you, that is a goal that I had. I had some goals that I had specifically when I started my law career. The specific ones I've met. The others are a journey, not a destination.
Well, thank you for your time. I think we've covered a lot. Congratulations again. I'm very proud of you. I know Mom and Steve are very proud of you. And I'm excited to see where you go next.
Thank you.